Hello, my name is Shaun Scallan. Today I'd like to talk to you about an approach to delivery of sustainable IT services borrowing from the principles of lifecycle analysis. So what do I mean when I say sustainability? What's it all about? Well, it means many things to many people, but I like to think of it in terms of what I'd like less of and what I'd like more of in the world. I'd like to see less deforestation through overuse, less pollution of all types, air, land and water, a reduction in the impact of climate change on our sea levels and weather patterns, and most of all, a fairer distribution of the resources we have available in this world. And on the other hand, more of this. Unfortunately, having more of this is challenged by our rate of resource consumption on this planet. Earth Overshoot Day happened last year on the 15th of September 2009. This is an unfortunate milestone. It marks the day where humanity lives beyond its ecological means. That is, it consumes more resources than the planet can generate or regenerate within a year. It is important to note that carbon is the primary culprit of our ecological overspending. To show this graphically, the dial indicates that we have spent 140% of the Earth's resources during 2009, so we overshot by 40%. This is a global average, 1.4 times the resources. The developed world is way above this, the rest of the world way below this figure. Of this overshoot, carbon is the primary culprit, with 50% of our ecological footprint coming from carbon emissions. So our planetary system cannot absorb all the carbon that we emit. Therefore, it builds up in the atmosphere and contributes to climate change. So the action we must take is to live within our means. That's what this is all about. But how do we do that? It's all about consumption at the end of the day. Consumption underpins our existence. It's at various levels and stages of development around the world, but sustainable consumption in whatever context is the target. So to business, how can ICT help us use less resources? We first must look at the operational efficiency of the equipment that we use itself and how we apply it. Essentially, we are trying to use less equipment that uses less power for run and cooling, whose embedded resources can be recovered as fully as possible and manufactured to minimise environmental impact. The approach for designing for minimising environmental impact is often referred to as Design for Environment, or DFE. The process to address these internal efficiencies are normal project management tools or management of change type tools. You can use a plan, do, check, act cycle, continuous improvement, measure, control, measure, but it must be driven by sound risk management practices and with good program/project management methodology. We've started with the 2% to get warmed up, if you like, and now we look towards the 98% of opportunities that IT could have a role to play in. So here are the usual suspects in terms of process dematerialisation, virtualisation and automation that are often referred to in the literature and in practice to attack that 98%. The opportunities include reduction of travel through the use of tools such as video, teleconferencing and web conferencing, and also collaboration tools that actually improve efficiency of remote working teams. This is not always the case, as collaboration is a new way of working in which much information is shared, and not a lot of organisations are mature enough for this, in my view. The real and significant opportunities, I believe, are in the supply chain, in the sales and operations planning space, warehouse and distribution management. Up and down the supply chain, improving efficiency with tools that allow us to schedule more effectively what it is that we are trying to achieve. So we understand the opportunities that exist. But what role does lifecycle analysis play in the determination of impacts of the services that we provide? I'd like to explain a little bit about lifecycle analysis to put it in context. Lifecycle analysis, or LCA, is an end-to-end impact analysis. The components of that analysis include an inventory, which is process-oriented and indicates an impact in various categories, so in an environmental sense, a social and an economic impact. Green IT, in its current form, focuses the impact on the environmental impacts, in particular, greenhouse gas emissions caused by the use of energy. So what does an LCA tell us? IT equipment is primarily electrical and electronic equipment, and its use of energy through its life cycle, that is from birth to death, is primarily in the end-use phase, or the run phase of that equipment. And one of the key impacts of that energy usage is in the form of greenhouse gas emissions. Other impacts occur at various phases, from manufacturing, packaging and distribution, use we have mentioned, and end of life, so the energy required for recovery and disposal. Given the dominance of the run phase in energy consumption, the ICT strategies we have developed and are continuing to develop focus on the end-use phase. So what have we done thus far? Well, in 2008, we undertook a program of virtualization as an approach to deliver better service in terms of processing, minimize resource usage through consolidation of equipment, and energy usage through more efficient and consolidated platforms. We've also looked at the balance of the fleet in terms of workstation technology from the perspective of procuring better equipment and delivering only the required functionality, and that's a work in progress. The next step was to develop the Green ICT strategy and perform an initial carbon footprint and set some targets by which we can be measured and improve our performance from a greenhouse gas emission perspective in particular. So the focus is and continues to be energy consumption. And this year we are conducting a validation of that initial carbon footprint that we undertook last year with a view to ensuring that the basis of our measurement was sound, to ensure the savings that we calculate are achievable. The initial cut of our Green ICT strategy was born out of the Australian Computer Society's Green ICT Strategies course, which I undertook early last year. The output of that course was an energy intensity reduction plan. This energy intensity reduction plan had a number of phases identified as part of the planning process. This energy intensity reduction plan focused on the use phase. This phase dominates the energy usage for ICT equipment, and we divided the plan into a number of phases which are ongoing. Phase 1 was a baseline and end-use phase reduction identification. Phase 2 was looking at business process re-engineering opportunities, and Phase 3 is business process re-engineering aimed at total life cycle. So what was our baseline? Well, our baseline was 1,621 megawatt hours per annum, or converted to equivalent CO2 emissions, 1,979 tonnes CO2 equivalent per annum. We set our targets at 20% for Phase 1 of energy reduction, and that is 20% of the above numbers, which seemed like a reasonable target at the time. And I acknowledge the ACS's course on Green ICT strategies as an input to this document. So how do we get to these numbers? In Phase 1, we conducted a greenhouse gas inventory for ICT equipment. And as is normal, we covered Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions in our analysis. Scope 1, we have none because we burn no primary fuel. Scope 2 is the main source of indirect emissions from our use of electricity in computing equipment. and telecommunications equipment. And Scope 3 is covered by other indirect emissions. In our case, we considered our outsourced data centre consumption to complete our picture. The geographical scope was Australia and New Zealand. Our facilities at that time, 4 manufacturing sites, 3 head office and corporate locations, 22 logistics, warehouse and sales offices, and 2 outsourced data centres. The calculation was based on make and model power consumption data from manufacturer. We made some assumptions also on duty cycle. The diagram illustrates our functional scope, in particular the data centre equipment, which is Unix for our SAP environment, and Wintel for file and print, Exchange, SharePoint, SQL Server, and so on. So our centralised computing environment. We have a typical wide area network, site router, and then site local area network equipment, and various endpoints, including desktops, laptops, thin clients, printers, both office and dispatch and production printers, as well as site servers where they occur, and handheld terminals. The inventory, which is so critical to obtaining an accurate baseline, was obtained using a number of tools. One of those was Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager, or a CCM, which we used to obtain details of endpoint devices such as laptops and thin clients. We used a number of other tools to complete the inventory of equipment such as thin clients, printers, and network devices. Our outsourced provider gave us data on the data center power usage, which was used to complete our assessment. So what were the results we got from our inventory? You've already seen the numbers, and the detail of those numbers is shown in this table. And in order to make a more meaningful comparison from year to year, we chose to divide the number of end devices into the total tonnes to give us a number of tonnes of CO2 per end device per annum. So it's around 1 tonne of CO2 per end device per annum. And we'll use that as a baseline going forward. I do understand that this number does vary by industry and by application, but this is our number based on our initial baseline. So we've done the inventory, we've got the baseline, we've got a reduction target, ready to go, and then life just gets in the way. June the 1st last year, Paperlinks, former parent, sells off Australian Paper, Paperlinks Office, Paper Products Marketing, and my department, IT, and we had a job to do. And by the end of that calendar year, 2009, we had to split SAP into 2 instances, provide dual access to the Paperlinks logistics site, which continue to provide service to AP in terms of third-party logistics, and we're still underway in the final stages of a significant environmental separation program. So despite this, what are we doing? So apart from that environment separation program, which certainly can distract somewhat, we're still proceeding with validation of footprint and opportunities, and we're using HP's carbon emissions management services to do that validation. We're modelling IT services on a lifecycle basis and trying to apply the design for environment principles to identify improvements in that space. And we're learning as we go. So we're not there yet, but we're still working at it. We've carried out a validation of our initial carbon footprint. We did this using real-time power meters that were installed around the business in order to get a representative measurement of our usage of power. It is anticipated that this data will give us a better measurement of our baseline. This allows us to set more achievable goals, and the results of this review are currently being reviewed. We've made these measurements, but what are the right metrics? What are the measures that really relate to our business? The total energy used is obviously one of those metrics, and that is gigajoule per tonne. Gigajoule and megawatt hours, however, are not created equally from a carbon debt perspective, and this is illustrated best by the coal versus renewable energy. In Australia, in Victoria, a brown coal-fired power station will emit 1.22 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, as compared to, in the state of Tasmania, 0.23 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. A dramatic difference. This leads to a different level of carbon debt depending on where you get your electricity from. So really, carbon emitted is still the base metric in the form of CO2 equivalents. And this is measured in tonnes, typically. So tonnes of CO2 equivalent for a period is one of the measures. Then some sort of efficiency metric, either per tonne of production, per thousand produced, per order to cash cycle, or some other relevant measure. Once we have this measure, we have to undertake initiatives that will impact those measures in a positive way, and we have to divide our opportunities up into a number of areas and then attack them one by one. I have listed the initiatives under the broad category of energy management, and as you can see, we start out with end user terminal equipment, so power management policies, screensaver to suspend, patch management, trying to do those out of hours, communications equipment, server side, so consolidation onto Blade, which we've done, virtualization of data center servers, which we've also done. We've also carried out a review of our ICT architecture from the perspective of minimum energy intensity design, and we have produced an initial cut of that. Our procurement standards have been largely based on EPEAT and Energy Star ratings, plus a look at vendor sustainability measures. In the space of business process re-engineering, we've looked at a number of business processes, such as inbound accounts payable automation, which we have done some work on. We've also done some work on purchase order approval automation, remote management of desktop, and the collaboration side of things is still, in my view, in a pilot form. It is important to note that the first two of the business process re-engineering projects shown here were not initiated for green IT reasons originally. Having said this, these projects still have positive impacts on the sustainability of our business operations. These serve as useful reference points and assist us in justifying future projects which seek to minimise the impacts of our operations. They also serve as useful reference points for the industry in moving towards more sustainable IT practices. The focus has been inward to date. Let's turn our focus to the supply chain and how we optimise that. Upstream inputs determine our overall footprint. Our vendors' footprint and sustainability must be considered. We can use a number of existing schemes to help us guide our vendor selection, and we must put our money where our mouth is. By putting our money where our mouth is, we encourage vendors in a commercial and very real sense to improve the way they run their business to help us to improve the way we run ours. So what have we used to guide our vendor and partner selection? We have analysed what is available in current information, and this changes almost daily. There are quite a huge number of schemes, and in order to limit this to a sensible number, we have selected ones that relate directly to the performance of our end user devices at this time. Energy Star 5, and we use EPEAT Gold as our standard. In addition to these standards for procurement of products, we have as a default position equipment that has WEEE and RoHS compliance as per European Union requirements. So this means waste electrical and electronic equipment and restriction of hazardous substances compliance. These represent some of the technical criteria for vendor selection, but there is one more area that we have considered, and that is an overall sustainability measurement. And this is based on the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, which gives an assessment on the broader sustainability of a business. The GRI is an independent body that allows businesses to report their sustainability performance in a transparent way, which is published on the internet each year. The GRI reporting framework specifies a number of different levels and application level adherence. Our GRI criteria are guideline level G3, application level adherence is a B minimum, and our preference is that external or GRI assurance is undertaken. But with all these assessment forms, I would encourage you to make your own informed assessment as to what criteria suits your business and what you are trying to achieve. To explain the GRI a little bit further, the data that is available on the internet rates IBM as an A, self-declared, companies like ASUS, Dell, Lexmark as B, and they are GRI checked themselves. HP is a B, it's self-declared. Intel is a B, it's also self-declared. I must point out that this list is not exhaustive and that the only vendor that has reported so far for 2010 is HP, and they remain a B as self-declared. I believe ratings like the GRI are very important to move us to a better place where we are held accountable for our performance individually and also collectively along the supply chain. For those that view the GRI as a cynical form of greenwashing, I will just say to you that transparency leads to improvement, and transparency is one of the cores of GRI. It will get better in time, and we must give it a chance and support those vendors that support these open and transparent forums for reporting their sustainability performance. It will only get better. Circling back to the use of lifecycle type approaches in the design of products and services, I'd like to summarise how we can use a lifecycle approach in terms of minimising the resources used to deliver a given service. We have initial focus on energy, but things like water is equally important. We must broaden out to understand our full impact over time, and this underpins a design for environment approach. That is, our products and services are designed to minimise their impact on the environment, and we give the consumers the choice in terms of the products that they purchase and the consequent impacts they have on the environment. Moving on to the social and business benefits of green ICT, I believe green ICT is a subset of a sustainable ICT. Its focus is energy, and that's okay. On the social side, we raise awareness of our use of energy and its impact on the environment. From a business perspective, it's fairly straightforward. The less resources we use, the less money and the less negative impact. And of course, there's an energy use reduction in all that we do if we are applying a life cycle approach to the design of our ICT systems. Having said this, I for one struggle with identifying the social metrics for green ICT measures and would welcome any input and discussion on this matter. We are now at conclusion time, and I would like to wrap up by summarising what we've talked about. I believe sustainability is a key business ability. It's always been there. Sustainable businesses stay around for the long haul. It's as simple as that. We do also need to understand what our business dimensions are in impact terms. This is very important. What does our business do, and what are its impacts? We then plan to mitigate these impacts. But from an ICT perspective, we wanted to try and get our own house in order by getting a baseline together, setting some targets, and measuring and reporting
and we're still in the process of measuring reporting for our first period. This then raises awareness about thinking in a more sustainable manner. And then we can expand into the so-called 98% where more and significant opportunities exist. We must look at our product and service life cycles. Vendor and partner selection will help drive demand for more sustainable services up and down the supply chain. And over time, we must expand from energy into other impacts from a resource usage perspective. This will bring us into a more balanced view of our impact on the environment and its resources. I'd like to thank you for listening and hope that you have got something out of the material I've presented. And I am available for questions. My contact details are shown on the slide. And I wish you a good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you may be. Thank you.